Welcome, 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 welcome to Sunny Side Up. I am so excited that you are here again, hanging out with me. I have a special guest today, Pastor Malone. I am so excited to have him here today. Listen, we are talking all things mental health for men. The month of June is dedicated to talking about and bringing awareness to men's mental health. And so I have not only Pastor Jalen Malone here with me, but he's also a therapist. And he's going to be able to give us that clinical advice on how to deal with a man that may be having some mental health issues, what mental health is, what it looks like from a male's perspective. And so I am so excited to have Pastor Malone. We are going to get right into things. I'm going to read his bio. It's full of good stuff. And so I want you guys to just bear with me as I read and tell you a little bit about who he is. So let's get into it. Jalen Malone currently serves as an associate pastor at Greater Works Cathedral under the leadership of Bishop Jonathan D. Mason. He also serves as the minister of music at Purpose of Life Ministries under the leadership of Pastor David W. Green Sr. Throughout his life, Jalen has had a strong desire not only to be in the presence of the Lord, but also to serve him as a great man of God with ambitions to impact not only his community, but the world by spreading the word of God. Jalen began serving in ministry at a young age, but did not accept his calling to ministry until the age of 21 while at Indiana State University, where he was one of the founders of Church at ISU. He later led this ministry for 2.5 years before graduating and moving to Indianapolis. Jalen received his master's of social work degree from Indiana University in 2022. He currently works as a hospice social worker for IU Health Hospital and as a behavioral consultant slash therapist for those with intellectual disabilities. He is also the CEO and founder of J. Malone Enterprises, LLC, which includes a graphic design business and the Generation Now podcast, created to be a beacon of light for emerging Christian leaders. Outside of church, Jalen serves as the marketing director for the Gospel Industry Network. Jalen recently married Nicole Malone on May 4th, 2024, and they have one daughter, Layla, who actively engages in ministry by his side. We are so excited to have Pastor Jalen, newlywed Pastor Jalen Malone, here with us on the Sunny Side Up podcast. Go ahead and introduce yourself. We are glad to have you here.
Well, thank you so much, Sunny, for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to be here on the Sunny Side Up show. And I am, as I told you before, I'm simply just the donkey that Jesus rides on. And so I am so honored and elated to share what I do in my 9 to 5 and add in some of that spiritual aspect as well to help our men and even some of our women as well. I want to add something in for our women too to help those men that walk beside you in this life, to help you see them as well and what they go through. So thank you again for having me, and can't wait to see what God is going to do on the show today.
Listen, congratulations again for your newlywed nuptials. We are so excited. I get so excited when I hear about people still getting married. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. So congratulations to you and your new wife.
Thank you. Shout out to her. She's probably watching.
Okay, shout out to you. Hey, Miss Malone. We are so excited to have both of you guys here with us. So we're just going to jump right into it. Tonight is Men's Night Out. All right. And it's a special podcast that deals with, like I said, special mental health segment that deals with men's mental health. We're going to get right into our questions, okay? Because we don't want to, we want to give ourselves enough time to talk about this thing. Now, you are here to bring the male perspective. You are the therapist. And so I'm just going to ask the questions and you just going to give us the answers. All right.
Okay, that sounds like a plan. And feel free to tune in and ask me more questions, as we go to pull more out of me. So yeah, let's go. I'm ready.
Absolutely. Okay, so the first question is, why do men struggle with their mental health? What does that look like?
That's a great question. And Sunny, I don't think that there is a one size fit all answer for that. It is a multifaceted question, and it's also a multifaceted answer. When I think about that question, I think about it in three different sects. Okay, so I think of it as the African American community as a whole. I think of it as the African American church, and then I think about it as how men were raised and conditioned. Okay, and I think that those are the three major impacts on why men struggle with their mental health. One, as the African American community as a whole, because first of all, the topic of mental health in the African American community is so taboo. We don't really talk about it. It's still new. It's not necessarily new, but people are just becoming aware that yes, it is a real thing that we deal with. But not only that, in the African American community as well, individuals experience trauma. And out of that trauma, we are told that what happens in our house is to stay in our house. And so, because of that, because that is a thing that transpires in the African American community, a lot of times men feel like we can't talk about these things, right? Um, so let's move on. We talk about African American community as a whole. Let's talk about the church. What does the church say when it comes to mental health? They tell us that there isn't anything wrong with you. You just need to pray about it.
Yeah,
Prayer changes everything, right? They tell you that that what you're dealing with is just a demon. That's a spirit that you need to have cast out, or you need to be delivered. In some instances, yes, there is a spiritual aspect to that, but sometimes it's just that an individual has a chemical imbalance in their brain that they need assistance with.
yeah,
And yes, you can pray about it, but sometimes they may need some medication to go along with that as well, and there's nothing wrong with that.
yeah,
And so I think that that can be a challenge as a man dealing with that, not only in your community but also in your church. But then what happens when we're raised as men, especially black men, we're told that we're to be strong. We're
yeah,
told that men don't cry, because if you cry, then you're a punk.
yeah,
Um, and they tell us to focus so much on our image, that we're to be strong, we're not to cry, we're not to show any emotion, because if we do, then we're considered a weak man. And so I think that those three things out of those three sects all come into play when you talk about a man who struggles with their mental health, because we are worried about what our community is going to say. We're worried about what the church is going to say. If you serve in leadership or you go to church, we're worried about what our family is going to say, what our work is going to say if we tell them, hey, I've been depressed these last couple of days. I don't know what's going on. I just feel down, and I don't really know what's going on. And they try to encourage you, but you still feel down. You still feel that weariness and you don't know why. And then people see you and they view you as a weaker man because of that, or a punk, so to say. And it's not that I'm a punk, it's not that I'm a weak man. I'm really just going through something that I don't know how to explain, that I may need a little bit more help than what I can get at my church or at my home. Um, and I think that's what it is.
I like what you said about not crying, not crying or being told not to cry. That's learned behavior, you know, that's taught, that's seen, that's told at a young age. And I mean, I'm raising young boys, and I tell my kids, my sons, yes, I want you to cry because I don't want you to become grown men, with no emotions. You know what I mean? And usually that's kind of what happens when you're told as a child, no, don't, you don't cry when you fall as a boy. You don't cry as you fall, if you fall, or if your feelings are hurt because you're considered, weaker than the other boy that maybe didn't cry if he fell or something else. But I tell my boys, no, I want you to be and stay in tune with that side of yourself, because when you guys become husbands, you
Hmm.
guys become priest over your homes one day, you will
Mm-hmm.
be able to, connect in that way with not only your wife, but your children and those around you. So I love what you said about that, amongst the other things. I connected with that because I just had a conversation with my just turned 13-year-old.
Mighty lamb.
And everything is just new. He's this teenager and he's just like this macho guy. And I'm just like, it's okay to be macho, but I want you to stay in tune with that side of you that has emotions. Simple.
Absolutely.
It has its purpose in the long run, and even now it does. Okay.
Absolutely.
So let's move on to our next question. What are men's issues? What are most men's issues in, the mental health world that you have seen?
Whew, that's another good one. I think that if a man can get past what we mentioned in the last question, um, there are other several major factors that also go into why a man doesn't receive the help that they need, such as I think of financial hardship, right? Or lack of insurance, especially in the African American community. Um, don't got the money to see a therapist.
Yeah.
My insurance, I have insurance, maybe have some form of insurance or a hip, you know what I'm saying, isn't going to cover a therapist for me. It maybe cover like some antidepressants or, something like that to help me. But how do I get to that or get diagnosed with something to help? So I think that, and that also goes into the access to healthcare.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
if I can't access it, then I can't get to it. Um, which goes into, even if I can access the healthcare, even if I do have the insurance, there is a
Yeah.
lack of representation of people that look like me, that
Sure.
understand what I go through,
Yeah.
that can see it from the way that I see it, and not just looking at it from what the DSM-5 says or what the clinician says or from their experience, but what it looks like for me as a Black man to live in today's America. The pressures that we get from work, the pressures that we get just by walking outside and getting pulled over by the police. You know what I'm saying? Does my therapist understand what that is like? And to be in my shoes. And then the last thing that I think of too is the challenge that a man has trying to differentiate or having to choose between seeking help for himself versus being a provider to his family. Because there's a lot of times that, I'll just say this, we as men, when we love somebody, we love hard.
Yeah.
Our goal is not only to please that individual, but to provide for that individual or that family. And many of times we will give the clothes of our back before we give it to others, because that's how we show love. We provide, you know what I'm saying? But there's times that come that it's like, man, I really need to work overtime at the job to provide Christmas, but I really know that I'm struggling in my mental health, and that I've really been down and I really need to talk to somebody. But I'll put that my need to the side in
Yeah.
order to ensure that the others that I'm caring for has what they need. And so I think that some of the issues that we come into are not only internal, like we talked with the last, but they're also external as well.
Wow. Wow. You covered a lot of things there. You covered a lot of things there. The responsibility, one thing I know for sure is that the responsibility of the man is great. And it goes back to even Bible days. God gave dominion to man he gave dominion to man over everything. I mean, he was over everything. And
Mm-hmm.
it started there. And I mean, just speaking, I mean, of course, I'm not a man. I would never know what you guys struggle with, and but I do understand and can see. I mean, we know the world we live in right now is not so friendly to the specifically the African American man. That's a whole different topic, and what that looks like versus someone that is not African American, the struggle is real and it just looks different. for you guys. So I am really, really, really just appalled that you covered that question like that. Let's look into what statistics say.
Let's do it.
Okay, so statistics says that the most prevalent mental health conditions amongst men are depression, anxiety disorders, schizophrenia, PTSD, and substance abuse. If you agree, say yes. If you don't agree, say no. And let's just talk about it. What does these conditions look like for men?
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree with these conditions. Um, yeah, let's talk about them. Let's go down through them. There is one thing that I do want to point out is talk a little bit about suicide too,
Oh
but
yeah.
I'm gonna tie because yeah, I'm gonna tie it into depression. So let's just start with depression. So we have to. I will tell you that men and women's experience when it comes to depression is different.
Okay.
Um, a man tends to show signs of depressions in signs of like tiredness, um, irritability, having trouble concentrating, difficulty sleeping, right? Those are like some of the most common, according to the DSM-5.
Okay.
Um, they may also, if a man is developing depression or having depression, they may also develop a loss of interest in work, a loss of interest in family, or even other hobbies that they enjoy, such as like NBA finals just ended, right? Watching, they want to come home and watch the game. They have a lack of interest in that. They also, but also in that, if a man neglects to treat his depression, especially as an African American man, it also tends to lead to things like drug and alcohol abuse.
Mm,
Because it can also lead to things like homelessness, incarceration, um, homicide, and even suicide. Because I said I was going to mention it, I can insert it right there. Even suicide, if a man neglects to take care of his depression, because when you think about suicide in the African American community, African American men, uh, suicide is the third leading cause of death in an African American male. Homicide is number one, of course. Um,
sure.
but that suicide for a man usually happens in between the ages of 15 and 24. So that's young people. That's really young, right? Um, and an African American male is actually 4 times more likely to die from suicide than an African American woman. So looking at that, um, a man that is depressed suffers in silence. He's not going to say a lot. Um, and a lot of that is because of pressures from other things, not just a man carries so much on his back. He carries the weight of his family. He carries the weight of trying to provide. And I don't know if people really understand the magnitude of that sometimes, especially, and I'll say this, my pastor just did a great explanation on Sunday of how he was coming from the perspective of Jacob, and Rachel, and talking about them making their journey to Bethlehem, and that Jacob was making his journey on the horse, while also at the same time he's trying to get them to a place, but also at the same time he hears Rachel in the back. You know what I'm saying? Bickering and crying and complaining that my husband isn't spending enough time with me. I want to be intimate with my husband, but the husband is trying to get you somewhere. You know what I'm saying? He's trying to get you to a place, but a man has to decide, I can't, because if I leave this place with the horses and I stay with the family, then we're not making any progress. So a man has to decide also, do I stay with the family and give the family the time that they need? Or do I continue to drive this horse and work and get us to where we need to be? And I think that a lot of times depression comes into that, because it's like, I love my family and I want to be with my family, but there is also times that I also want to be at work and do what I need to do to drive that force. And sometimes that can make a man depressed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of factors that go into depression. So that's depression, because I can preach a whole message on that. Let's
And
talk
when
about anxiety.
you Jacob and Leah, I mean, and Rachel, and I just thought about Joseph and Mary trying to get her from one city to the next, all the trauma in between. Let's not talk about the trauma in between as to why
Yeah.
they leave. And then they get to a place and, you know, baby Jesus got to be, born in a smelly,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? I mean, I would want to know what was going through Joseph's mind. What was going through Jacob's mind? We see mental health very early on.
Oh, yes.
Bible days, even in
Mental
the
health is all through the Bible. It's
yeah,
all through the Bible. You see it in the Old Testament
in the
with
new.
Jacob and Israel, or Jacob and Esau. You see it with David and Saul. You
Yes,
see it with, you know what I'm saying? Mental health is all through the Bible. You just have
yeah,
to take a moment and look at it from a different perspective and not just read it word for word, and look at the spirit that's going on
yeah.
within the text to see what's really going on. So yeah, it's
Wow.
there.
Yeah, it's definitely there. Let's talk about the anxiety disorders,
Okay.
PTSD, substance abuse, even
Okay.
schizo. Let's touch on suicide. We wanted to, because these things exist and men are dealing with this. Okay? These
Mm-hmm.
things, men are dealing with these things, whether you are in the church or outside of the church. Okay, these things have no respect to person. A
Mm-hmm.
man is a man is a man, and the responsibility is great, whether
It
you're
is.
inside of the church or outside of the church.
It
Amen.
is.
We want to dig and dive into what some of those things look like. So we touched
Mm.
depression. I want to touch on anxiety disorder. I want to touch on suicide, like you mentioned. That was one I meant to add, and I want to talk about PTSD because I want to know what this look like. What are signs of these conditions? We could just start with PTSD. What are signs
Okay.
of it? Is it, and what are signs of it?
Okay, so PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is what that is. Um, it PTSD is simply a response to trauma, whether it's a insulated event, meaning that it only happened one time, or a reoccurring event, right? Um, the factors that are included in PTSD, the main big ones in men is childhood maltreatment, one, so childhood trauma. You have then you have physical and sexual assault in men, and then you have military combat. Okay, all three of those are the biggest contributors of PTSD in a man. Um, so, what that looks like, how that manifests in a man is maybe you're having a conversation with the man about, I don't know, let's say you're watching Forrest Gump. Your husband, your grandfather, your dad served in some kind of military experience. Here's those gunshots, or even the Fourth of July is coming up. The
Oh yeah.
fireworks are going off, and you see them have a response to that sound. And you're like, "Will, why are you tripping? What's going on?" He had an experience somewhere in his life that is causing a response, not only internal, but also that internal then becomes external. And that is what PTSD is. It is simply a a stained, I think of it like a stained, some stained clothes. Doesn't matter how much Dawn you put on it, it doesn't matter how many times you run it through the wash, it's always going to be there because it's engraved, it's stained in that man's mental and his body, because it goes both together. It's going to be there both mentally and physically. PTSD.
Okay, that's PTSD. All right, let's talk about suicide.
Suicide. As I mentioned before, suicide is a silent killer. So if a man is suicidal, it's very important that you are attentive. And I'll share this too. Men are very routine. I'll say
Okay.
it again. Men are very routine. They don't really change their routine. You can almost bet what a man is going to do Sunday to Sunday. You can
Oh,
almost bet it.
hold on, Pastor Malone. Something is going on with Alexa. I
It's
don't know
okay.
what you're talking about. Let me see. Is that Alexa or Siri? All right. That's all right. Things happen in the middle of stuff sometimes. I got two,
Ain't that it?
um,
It's okay.
and that is all right. We're gonna get this together.
It is okay. Take your time.
All righty, I'm back.
No
Okay.
worries.
Yes, suicide. Go ahead. I'm
Yeah.
listening.
No, so I'll just go back. So suicide is a silent killer. And the tip that I will share is that men are routine. So it's very imperative that if an individual is suicidal, look for changes in their regular schedule, right? Look for that. Listen to how they talk.
Okay.
Um, they may say things like, maybe this world would be better off without me. I don't feel like I contribute to this world anymore. I feel worthless. Um, I don't see any point to life anymore. Pay attention to what they say. And the biggest thing, and I'm telling you, is pay attention to their routine. Watch what a man does. A man is usually not going to change his schedule. And if you see changes in his behavior, in his schedule, check on that man and make sure that he's okay. Truly ask him, how are you feeling? You
Okay.
know, are you all right? Ask him those questions. And if that man is safe with you and he trusts you, he will let you know what's going on eventually.
All right, ladies, are we listening? Because this is some good advice. Check on our men. Let's check on our brothers. Let's check on our uncles, our fathers, our husbands, our friends. Let's check in on them. This is some good stuff. Let's check in. Let's make sure that we are staying in touch with, like Pastor Malone said, their routine. If something is changed, say you talk to your brother or something every morning or every night. You used to talking to him or your sister, not your sister, but your brother or your uncle or your father, and you don't hear from him. Call him up. Try to figure out what's going on. Go the extra mile. Show up. Pop up. And check in. Because something may be going on. Okay. All right. What about, I think we did talk a little bit about substance abuse and what that looks like. Anxiety disorders.
Okay. Anxiety. Um, what can I say about anxiety? Anxiety will show up. I just left seeing Inside Out 2. I'm just gonna put that plug in there. So Inside Out 2 is all
Okay.
about anxiety. Um, so what can I say about anxiety?
Good,
Um,
by the way.
yeah, it's great. I took my client, he's 13, right in that puberty age. We talked about it, incorporated. It was great. Well, what can I say about anxiety for men? It shows up in different ways. Usually, anxiety is a core, a comorbid um, diagnoses, meaning that is also connected to and or showing up at the same time as something else. So it can be like a man is depressed and has anxiety. A man has substance abuse and has some anxiety or whatever, PTSD and anxiety. They go together. So it's a comorbid uh, um, Lord help my tongue today.
I know
It works together.
they work together. They coincide.
um, yeah, they work together. And many of times anxiety too is also a response to trauma. Um, so let's talk about how it can show up in men. It can show up, symptoms can include things like feelings of anxiousness, like oh I got to do it right now, like I got to get there right now. um, being afraid, being irritable or on edge. um, it can even have anxiety can manifest physically too, such as like a racing heart, a rapid heartbeat, tightness or tension in the chest, or butterflies in the stomach, or even like anxiety sometimes is also put with like uh, OCD. They're like washing their hands a lot. They always have to have hand sanitizer, or every after they go outside or go to the store, they have to take a shower. Sometimes those things can also be anxious behavior. They can even be avoiding people or places for whatever reason. Can also be ways that an individual could show signs of anxiety.
Okay. Man, we are touching some serious things here. These are all mental health conditions, you guys, that people are really dealing with. Okay, this is serious stuff. And these are statistics that show that specifically men are dealing with these type of conditions. And so we need to continue to check in on our men. Um, at what age do men develop mental illness? Is there an age?
Mm-mm. No, there's no age in which an individual develops a mental illness or a mental diagnosis. It happens early.
Okay.
PTSD can set in for a young child early,
Okay.
and they can be fine for years and years and years, and it happened later. I don't think there is an age.
Okay. All right. And then for us ladies, how do we deal with a man with mental illness? What does that look like for us? What do we need to do? I know you mentioned us paying attention to the routine, and just being understanding of just the weight that men carry, period. But what
Hmm.
else can we do to assist out the men that are in our lives? Um, the best way. What is the best way to assist?
Sure. So I'm gonna gauge this question towards the ladies. Okay. Now there goes my Siri. Whatever. So I would say one of the biggest things that I would tell women when it comes to helping their a man is that is dealing with mental health issues, or I'll even say sometimes, and I don't know why I feel like to say this. Just because somebody is depressed does not mean that they have depression. Just because somebody is anxious does not mean that they have anxiety.
Mhm.
Okay. So don't try to put a diagnosis on somebody just because they're showing signs. Sometimes they're just having a rough day, you know. But the biggest thing is that if a man comes to you and tells you these things, first thing is do not judge them. Do not judge them. Women have to understand and to know that they have the power to either build, and it's biblical, to either build up a man or to tear down a man. And if a man comes to you in a time that they are low, that they're going through something, that they're having a rough time, and they trust you with that, and they pour themselves out to you emotionally, but the whole time that they're pouring themselves out to you, you're loading your gun to use that against them in a confrontation or whatever the case may be, when you're upset or frustrated or not getting what you need, and you use that against them, that man is going to shut down and he will never talk to you again.
Wow.
So do not judge him. Simply be there to be a comfort and listen to him. Um, and I think that many of times, so I'll say that. And I think that many of times, if a man does have a mental health diagnosis, they have gone to a psychiatrist, a doctor, whatever, they may even be subscribed to medications. Do not see that man for his condition, but see that man as being a man. And I think that many of times people look at an individual, even goes back to biblical times, of their condition and not see the person. For example, in Bible times, you have the woman with the issue of blood. You have the blind man that stood by the gate called Beautiful. You always see the condition before you see the person. See the person and not the condition, right? And so I would say be supportive to them. And like I already said, don't use what they tell you later. Don't use that against them. And then the last thing I would say is community, community, community. Do not allow that individual to isolate themselves. Even if they decide and say, hey, I just want to be left alone, that man goes to his man cave and turns the game on or whatever, come in there. Say, hey, I know you want to be left alone, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. And sit there in the silence, even if you're uncomfortable, even if you have something else that you want to do. Just being present and surrounding that individual with community will help them come out of whatever it is that they're going through because they feel the love and support just by you being there, even if you don't say anything. And that's
Being
what I would say.
Being present in the moment. I'd like to just share that Proverbs 14:1 says that the wise woman builds her house. I'll say that again, ladies. The wise woman builds her house, but the foolish pulls it down with her hands. We have so much power. I totally agree with you, Pastor Malone, as it relates to the power that we have to either build up our home, whether we're married or not, right? Or tear it down. And so let's be, proactive, and let's be strategic, okay, in exuberating or, embracing the power, should I say, that we even have to build up the men in our lives and to make their space a safe space, a comfortable space, a loving space, a space where there's peace, where peace resides. That's important. We
Hmm.
have the ability to do that. We do. So let's be proactive about that and let's be present in the moment. You may have gotten off of work and had a long day, but your husband or the person that is in your life is having a bad day, or may have gone through some challenges in the past weeks or maybe even the months. Let's be present. Let's put aside ourselves, and let's be present in the moment with that individual. I think that is very, very important. We do not say that or share that. And it's very important to be able to be present. Just being present is sometimes enough for some people. Just being present. That means, hey, how was your day? Even if you say, I'm going to my man cave, like Pastor Malone said, okay, I'm going to sit with you. I just want to be with you. And really being genuine about it. Not going in there arguing with him in the man cave. Okay, really just sitting there, getting into the game. If that's what he's watching, and starting dialogue, having those conversations about what's going on in the game. Or listen, let's pick up a joystick and let's start playing a video game. Come on, ladies, our hands work too. When it comes to these video games, if that's what your significant other is into and he's having a bad day, let's not talk about the game. Let's get on it and let's play with him. We want to create peaceful environments for our families and for the leading men in our life. All right, I think we got time for maybe one more question, and I want to just touch on this question. I want to talk about narcissism. I want to talk about what that looks like in the mental. Well, first off, what it is, um, and what it looks like in the mental health world.
Okay, so let's say what it is, and I'll put it like this: narcissism essentially is one who um, thinks or believes that they are superior to others, that they are better than others. They don't want to talk to or spend time with anybody that is quote unquote below them. That's layman's term.
Okay.
Okay, that's the best way I can put it. A narcissist also always wants to have control. Doesn't want to hear what you got to say. It's my way or the highway. When that comes to mental health, though, according to the DSM-5, there is a diagnosis that is called narcissistic personality disorder, NPD. Okay. And I know I've mentioned the DSM-5 several times. That's what therapists use to check themselves. And so in the DSM-5, it'll have all kinds of any diagnosis you could think of. And it'll tell you what it is, and it'll give you different um, things, criteria that they must have in order to meet, and they have to meet so many of them to be diagnosed with that. And so, according to the DSM-5, and I know this because as soon as you sent it to me, and I was looking at the the things, I was like, what does the DSM-5 say about it? The DSM-5 says that narcissism is clinically diagnosable condition, and it is described as compromising a pervasive pattern of grandiosity or being grand, whether in fantasy or behavior, and it's a consistent need for admiration and a lack of empathy, beginning in early adulthood and present in variety of contexts. Um, so narcissism and mental health go hand in hand. They they need some help. Okay. The criteria for this is like a grandiose sense of importance. We see this all the time in church. Let's just be real. I just want to throw that out there. We see it all the time in church. A grandiose sense of self importance, a preoccupation of fantasies of unlimited success or power or brilliance or beauty or whatever, a belief that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by those who are in their shoes or are equal to their level, a need for excessive admiration, a sense of entitlement. I mean, the list goes on, right? Um, but not everyone meets the criteria to have, narcissistic disorder. Many of times it can be a mental illness, but many of times the individual uses it as a tool to cover up an area that they lack themselves. Maybe they lack control in their home. Maybe they lack control in their job, and whatever area it is that they have control of, they hold on to it so tightly because they don't really feel that. Um, so sometimes you got to look into it deeper. What's really going on? Because not everybody's going to meet that criteria. Um, but yeah, that's what narcissism is. They have to control everything, and it's my show. It's all about me. Anything you can do, I can do it better, kind of thing.
So I'd
Um,
like to say that narcissism can be, you can, be a narc, whether you're a man or a woman. Okay. And sometimes we often point at the men as being narcissists, but we ladies, we can be, narcissists as well. My question, because it is men's night out, would be how to deal with a man, that, exemplifies narcissism or that have these qualities or these traits of a narc.
I
What
think
best
I
advice?
think the best thing that I can say is I touched on it. Many of times an individual shows signs of being a narc or a narcissist because they lack control in another area.
Yeah.
They use it as a way to cover up the way that they really feel on the inside. On the inside, I feel low. On the inside, I feel less than. On the inside, I feel like people just walk over me all the time. And not saying that a man has to hold power and just walk over people and everything has to be about them. But in what areas of their life do they feel belittled? Do they feel less than? That they feel like in this part of my life, I have to show up and be big because I'm not getting it somewhere else. And so, what I would say is really look and assess. I guess that's kind of like the clinical side of me. Assess what is really going on here. Why are you coming at me like this? Because there's probably something else underlining that's going on. And if you can find out what that is, I can guarantee you that will chill out.
So understanding that there's an underlying health condition. There's an underlying condition. There's something going on. Understanding that there's a deeper root somewhere. Having patience. Lots,
Mm-hmm.
lots of patience. The
Lots of patience.
patience. Yes. Um, we're going to wrap this thing up because I know you have another podcast. We're going to have to come back and revisit some of these things that we didn't discuss. But this was like a great, hearty conversation and definitely a start. Tell us where we can find you. I know you have your own podcast that is just phenomenal. And tell us where we can find you. I appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And if you want to do this again, we should. I
Yeah.
will share this before I share my social things.
Okay.
The DSM-5 recently was updated because I know that I'm in church, you're in church.
Yes.
Um, the DSM-5 recently was updated, and now an individual can be diagnosed with what is called religious trauma, aka church hurt.
Come on.
So it is a diagnosable mental health
That
condition.
say it again.
Yes, an individual can be diagnosed with what is known as, according to the clinical side, those of us who are therapists, it's called religious trauma. But in other
Pastor,
words,
can you just talk a little bit about what that looks like? What does that
yeah.
look like? Just give us a brief.
So so I will say that I am a little biased,
Okay.
and as social workers, we have to be aware of our biases.
Sure.
I believe that the church does not hurt people. It's hurt people in the church that hurt people. For example, throughout this show, we've talked about trauma, we've talked about narcissism, and how other underlining issues are going on that
Yeah.
people sometimes project what they are going through on other people that ends up inadvertently hurting other people. And because the church is such a huge institution, it's especially in the Black community,
Yeah.
an individual gets hurt at said church and says that the church hurt me, but maybe it was the pastor, maybe it was the first lady, or the minister of music, or whatever. It wasn't the church as a whole. It was that individual or group of individuals that hurt you, and not the church. And so religious trauma or church hurt, according to the DSM-5, focuses on being able to overcome and identify the areas of your life in which that you were hurt. What caused you to turn your back? Now, this is the pastor in me. What caused you to turn your back on God? What caused you to leave that church and say the church ain't nothing and the church ain't this, church ain't that? Because everybody's not like that. There
Yeah.
are people out there that honestly want to do ministry and
Yeah.
that have a heart for God. And I will say this, there is no such thing as a perfect church. There
Yeah.
is no such thing as a perfect leader. If you go to a church that says that they're perfect, do not join it because you will be the first person to mess it up.
Okay.
Sorry. Um, and I just don't believe that there is a such thing as anything being perfect. The only thing that is perfect is the Lord Himself. And the
Yeah.
one thing that I love about my pastor, Bishop Jonathan D. Mason, is that if an individual joins his church, his exact words are, "I'm not a perfect pastor, and this is not a perfect church, but my whole desire is to lead you to a perfect God." So
Wow.
he'll tell you there's going to be things I'm going to say that you don't agree with. There may
Sure.
be things that are done in this church that you may not agree with. But in all things, know that my whole heart and desire is to lead you to a perfect God. And
Yeah.
so, yes, religious trauma, church hurt, according to the DSM-5, is a real thing. But the focus is being able to realize and see what happened, what went wrong, and how do I heal and be delivered from what I went through.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that was a brief summary, very brief summary. We are going to have to come back with that because I am a life coach and I have clients myself. And the first thing that a lot of my clients talk about is the church traumatic, you know, just the traumatics and dramatics of their experiences at church. And it's really horrible sometimes, because you try to give those biblical principles and the things that you can do, try to say the things that you think would best suit their situation and try to help. But sometimes it's unrepairable. It's not repairable. Uh,
Yeah.
and so I think that this is something that we do need to start talking about ways to help people that have been hurt in the church. And I do agree. I don't think that it's the church itself. I do think that it is hurt people hurting people, you know. And so that is really, 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 really important. We are out of time. I want you to tell us where we can find you, Pastor Malone. We will be getting together again to discuss more of these things that we didn't cover, some of the questions. And then I want to dive into that church hurt. I do. I want to dive into that with you. And so hopefully you can um, find time in your busy schedule
For sure.
on with us and talk about some of these things from, a pastor's perspective and a man's perspective. So tell us where we could find you.
Yeah. Well, like I said, thank you again for having me. It was a blast. And I look forward to doing it again. You can find me on socials. You can find me on Facebook. It's just my name, Jalen Malone. Instagram, it is Jalen L. Malone. You can even go to my website, www.jalenlmalone.com. There you will find me everywhere. You can see some of my work as a graphic designer. You can watch the show or listen to the show, the Generation Now podcast. You can find my podcast show on YouTube, and also on your favorite podcasting station, whether it's iHeartRadio, Apple Music, Spotify, whatever, wherever you watch your podcast at, I'm there. The main social media that I use is Facebook. Oh, and TikTok. I've been
Yeah.
trying to do more on TikTok. Um, and that's just Jalen Malone as well. But for the most part, I mainly post on Facebook. So yeah, Facebook is the best place, and my website. Any other places, hit me up. I'm here.
Pastor Malone, I am so excited that you said yes to doing this and coming on this show and, just sharing your area of expertise and just sharing your thoughts with us. We really appreciate this. Us sunny side uppers, we appreciate this and we would love to have you back on the show again in the near future to discuss some of these other things that we didn't get to cover. But this was a great show. Listen, thank you guys for tuning in today. Pastor Malone has given you his contact information. You know where to find me on Facebook and, of course, Instagram and at justusib.com. Until next time, we are signing off. Be blessed. This was men's night only. Be blessed. Stay in touch with your family, the men in your life. Stay present. Pay attention to the routines, like Pastor Malone said, and be present. Be present. That's more so, you know, more important. Be present. Be present. All right, you guys. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.